The deep space monitoring station on Luna Base hummed with its usual quiet energy. Screens flickered with data streams from countless sensors pointed at the dark void beyond Earth's orbit. It was just another normal day for the night shift team, until it wasn't. John Baker stretched in his chair and sipped his cold coffee. After 8 hours of watching routine cosmic radiation patterns, his eyes were starting to blur. The clock showed 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time when his monitor lit up with an unusual alert. "That's strange," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. The signal came from the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune's orbit. It wasn't random space noise or the usual chatter from Earth's deep space probes. This was different, a pattern that repeated every 12 seconds. Baker sat up straight and began running the standard analysis programs. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as more data poured in. After 20 minutes of checking and double-checking, he knew this was no false alarm. He reached for the red phone that connected directly to United Earth Defense Force headquarters. "This is Deep Space Monitor Station 7, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I need to speak with the duty officer. Priority level Alpha." Within an hour, Captain James Miller stood in the station's main control room, looking at the signal data with narrowed eyes. His uniform was perfectly pressed despite the early hour, and his presence brought a sense of calm authority to the room. "Show me everything," he ordered, and Baker played back the signal recordings. The pattern was clear now, a series of electromagnetic pulses that couldn't be natural. "It's not one of ours," Miller said, crossing his arms. "And it's too organized to be random space noise." He turned to the communication officer. "Have we tried responding?" "Yes, sir," the young officer replied. "We've sent standard greeting patterns on all frequencies. No response yet." Miller nodded slowly. "Launch the long-range probes. I want eyes on whatever's out there." The next 12 hours were tense. The probes sped toward the signal source, powered by their advanced ion engines. Meanwhile, more experts arrived at the station, each offering theories about the mysterious transmission. At 4:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the first probe images arrived. The control room fell silent as the pictures appeared on the main screen. There, floating in the black of space, was a fleet of massive ships. Their designs were like nothing humans had ever seen. Smooth curves of dark metal stretching for kilometers. 15 ships, someone counted. No visible propulsion emissions. Miller leaned forward, studying the images carefully. "They're dead in space," he realized. "No power signatures at all. That signal, it's a distress call." The discovery sent shockwaves through Earth's leadership. Humanity had just found its first alien civilization, and they were in trouble. Over the next few days, a basic form of communication was established using light signals. The aliens confirmed Miller's theory. Their entire fleet had suffered a catastrophic power failure while passing through the solar system. Without help, their life support systems would eventually fail. In the secure meeting room of the UEF headquarters, Earth's leaders faced a historic decision. Admiral North, the highest-ranking officer of the Defense Force, stood before the Emergency Council. "We have two choices," he said, his voice grave. "We can ignore their call for help, citing security concerns, or we can mount the largest rescue operation in human history." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Miller, who had been invited to speak, stood up. "With all due respect," he said, "we only have one choice. They need help. We can help them. Everything else is just details." The council members looked at each other. One by one, they nodded. The vote was unanimous. As Miller walked out of the meeting, Admiral North caught up with him. "Congratulations, Captain. You're now in charge of humanity's first alien rescue mission." He handed Miller a datapad. "Pick your crew. You launch in 48 hours." Miller took the pad, already thinking about the challenges ahead. Whatever these aliens were, whatever technology they possessed, they were about to learn something important about humanity. When someone needs help, Humans, answer the call. The UES Horizon led Earth's rescue fleet through the darkness of space. 5 ships, carrying the best engineers and scientists humanity could gather, pushed their engines to maximum speed. Captain Miller stood on the bridge, watching the distant dots of light that marked the stranded alien vessels grow larger. "Time to intercept?" Miller asked, his eyes fixed on the main screen. 2 hours, sir," replied the navigator. "All ships maintaining formation." The rescue fleet had made the journey in record time, but Miller couldn't shake the feeling that every minute counted. The aliens' last light signal message had reported failing life support systems on their civilian ships. As they drew closer, the true size of the alien vessels became clear. Even the smallest was 3 times larger than the horizon. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light, making them look like holes in space. "Engineering team reports ready." Tom Walker's voice came through the comm system. The lead engineer had spent the entire journey studying the scans of the alien ships. "We've prepared the emergency power units." The fleet came to a stop 5 kilometers from the nearest alien vessel. Up close, the ships were both beautiful and strange, with smooth curves that seemed impossible to build. "Broadcasting greeting message on all frequencies," the communications officer announced. For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then the main screen lit up. The alien that appeared was tall and thin, with gray-blue skin and large eyes. It wore what looked like a military uniform. "I am High Commander Rel of the Vril Fleet," it said, its words translated by the advanced AI systems. "We accept your approach." Miller stepped forward. "I'm Captain James Miller of the United Earth Defense Force. We're here to help." The alien commander's expression was hard to read, but its tone carried clear displeasure. "The Vril have traveled the stars for 1,000 years. Now we must accept aid from a species that has barely left its own planet." Miller kept his voice calm. "Sometimes the newest eyes see things others might miss. May we send a team to assess your power systems?" There was a long pause before Rel answered. "Proceed. But know that our technology is far beyond your understanding." The first teams launched in small shuttles, headed for the largest Vril ship. Tom Walker led the engineering group, while Miller commanded the security detail. As they approached the docking area, Walker whistled at the complexity of the alien technology. "Look at that hull design," he said over the comm. "It's like it was grown, not built." The airlock cycled, and the human team entered the Vril ship. The corridors were tall and curved, clearly designed for beings larger than humans. Emergency lights cast a dim blue glow everywhere. A group of Vril engineers waited for them. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, looking down at the humans with what seemed like a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Our quantum core drive failed during solar alignment," one of them explained, leading the way to their engine room. "Without it, all systems are failing." The engine room was massive. In the center, a dark sphere hung suspended in a complex framework of metal and crystal. Walker approached it carefully, his scanners working overtime. "Interesting," he muttered. "The core uses some kind of exotic matter for power generation. But the containment system..." He turned to the Vril engineers. "Your containment failed first. The solar radiation disrupted it." The aliens exchanged looks. "Impossible," one said. "Our containment systems are perfect." Walker pulled out his tablet, showing them the scan results. "Perfect for normal space. But our sun is entering an unusual cycle. The radiation patterns are different from what you expected." The Vril engineers studied the data. Slowly, their expressions changed from dismissal to concern. They huddled together, speaking quickly in their own language. Finally, the lead engineer turned back to Walker. "Perhaps you understand more than we assumed. How would you suggest we proceed?" Walker grinned. "Well, we brought some fusion generators. They're not as advanced as your quantum core, but they're hardened against solar radiation. We could use them to power up your basic systems while we work on the containment problem." The Vril engineer looked at its companions, then back at Walker. "Show us." Miller watched the exchange with hidden satisfaction. The first step toward cooperation had been taken. Now they just had to save 15 ships full of aliens before their life support failed completely. As Walker began explaining the power transfer process, Miller's comm unit buzzed. It was the Horizon. "Sir," his first officer's voice was tense. "We're detecting massive power fluctuations from the civilian ships. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." Tom Walker wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the complex diagrams spread across his workstation. The Vril engineers had finally shared their technical data, and what he saw both amazed and worried him. The clock was ticking. They had less than 72 hours before the civilian ship's life support systems failed completely. "The quantum core isn't just a power source," he explained to Captain Miller, pointing at the holographic display. "It's connected to everything." These ships literally grew around it. Miller frowned at the complex images. "Can we help them or not?" "Yes," Walker said, then held up his hand. "But not the way we first thought. The fusion generators aren't enough. We need something bigger." He turned to the Vril chief engineer who towered over them. The alien's name was too complex for human tongues, so they called her Mira. She had been the first to truly cooperate with the humans. "Your containment system," Walker said, "it's like a perfect sphere of energy." "Right." Mira nodded. "The quantum core must be held in absolute balance. When the solar radiation disrupted this balance, everything fell apart," Walker finished. He stood up and walked to the main engineering display. "But what if we don't try to contain it? What if we redirect it instead?" The human engineer began drawing on his tablet, the images appearing on the larger screen. His idea was bold, perhaps crazy. Instead of trying to shield the quantum core from the solar radiation, they would use that same radiation to power a new kind of containment field. "Your ships are already designed to channel energy," he explained. "We can use our fusion generators to create a magnetic tunnel, guiding the solar radiation around the quantum core instead of letting it hit directly." Mira studied the design, her large eyes blinking rapidly. This should not work," she said slowly. And yet, the calculations suggest it might. They decided to test the theory on the smallest Vril ship first. Human and alien engineers worked side by side, installing fusion generators at key points around the vessel. The work was difficult. The humans had to wear special suits to operate in the Vril ship's low-oxygen environment. "Power generators in position," Walker reported from his station on the test ship. "Beginning startup sequence." The fusion generators hummed to life. Energy readings spiked on all monitors as the magnetic field took shape. Walker watched nervously as the radiation levels around the quantum core changed. "Core temperature stabilizing," Mira announced. "Energy patterns are unusual, but holding steady." For a tense minute, everyone watched the readings. Then, slowly, lights began coming on throughout the small ship. Systems that had been dead for days sparked back to life. "It's working," Walker exclaimed. He turned to Mira with a grin. "Your quantum core is using the solar radiation as fuel instead of fighting against it." The success on the small ship brought new energy to the rescue operation. Teams of human and Vril engineers began adapting the solution for the larger vessels. They worked in shifts, racing against time to save the civilian ships. But as they prepared to scale up the operation, a problem emerged. The larger ships needed more power than they had initially calculated. The fusion generators they had brought wouldn't be enough. "We need at least twice the power," Walker told Miller during an emergency meeting. "Without it, the magnetic tunnels won't form properly." Miller looked at the resources they had left. "The Horizon's main reactor," he said finally. "Could we use it?" Walker's eyes widened. "You want to take your ship's main power source offline. If it means saving those civilian ships, yes." The decision was made. The Horizon would sacrifice its main reactor power, running on auxiliaries only. It was risky. If anything went wrong, the human rescue ship would be as stranded as the Vril fleet. As they prepared for the power transfer, Mira approached Walker. "We did not believe you could help us," she said quietly. "We were wrong. Your species lacks our technology, but you see solutions where we see only problems." Walker smiled as he calibrated the power linkages. "That's the funny thing about humans," he replied. "Sometimes not knowing something is impossible is our greatest strength." Above them, the massive form of the civilian ship loomed in the darkness. Soon they would know if their daring plan would save thousands of lives or leave two fleets stranded in the cold depths of space. Red warning lights flashed across the Vril civilian ship's emergency displays. The largest vessel, carrying over 3,000 Vril families, was losing life support faster than predicted. In the makeshift control center, Captain Miller watched as both human and Vril crew members rushed to address the crisis. "Life support down to 31%, a Vril technician announced, their voice steady despite the dire situation. "Temperature dropping in residential sectors." Tom Walker burst into the control room, his spacesuit covered in frost from working in the ship's outer sections. "The power transfer isn't happening fast enough," he reported, pulling off his helmet. "The magnetic tunnels are forming, but the cold is affecting our equipment." Miller turned to Mira, who was coordinating with her engineering teams. "How long do we have?" "At current rate of failure, less than 10 hours, she replied. Her usual calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. "The children and elderly will feel the effects first." The situation had become critical 3 hours ago when they discovered that the civilian ship's life support systems were more damaged than initially thought. The cold of space had crept in through microscopic cracks in the hull, caused by the same solar radiation that had disrupted their quantum cores. "We need more power, faster," Walker said, pulling up system diagrams on the main screen. "The Horizon's reactor is at maximum, but it's not enough for a ship this size." Miller made a quick decision. "Contact the other rescue ships. Tell them to divert all non-essential power to us." He looked at his crew. "That means they'll be running on emergency systems only." The order went out, and soon power readings began to climb as the other human ships channeled their energy into the effort. It was a dangerous move. If anything went wrong, the entire rescue fleet would be vulnerable. In the residential sectors, Vril families huddled together as the temperature continued to drop. Human medical teams, working with Vril doctors, distributed thermal blankets and set up emergency heating units. The sight of alien children shivering in the cold drove the rescue teams to work even harder. "Power transfer at 60%, Walker called out. "The magnetic tunnels are stabilizing, but we're still losing heat faster than we can replace it." Mira suddenly straightened, her eyes fixed on a secondary display. "The quantum core," she said. "It's responding to the magnetic fields differently than on the smaller ship. The energy patterns are changing." Walker rushed to her station, studying the readings. "It's not just accepting the power," he realized. "It's adapting to it. The core is learning." For a moment, everyone in the control room stared at the displays. The quantum core's energy signature was shifting, synchronizing with the human fusion power in ways they hadn't seen before. "Divert all power to the core," Walker ordered. "Let it complete the adaptation." The next few minutes were tense as power readings spiked dangerously high. Warning alarms blared across all ships, but no one dared interrupt the process. Then suddenly, the quantum core flared with new energy. Life support systems responding. A Vril technician shouted. "Temperature stabilizing in all sectors." The control room erupted in cheers, human and Vril alike. The quantum core had not only accepted the emergency power, but had used it to repair its own systems. The ship's life support was coming back online. Miller smiled as he watched his crew celebrate with their alien counterparts. But Walker's voice cut through the joy. "Captain," he said urgently, "long-range sensors are picking up something. A massive solar flare, heading right for us." The celebration died instantly. Everyone knew what another burst of solar radiation could mean. "How long?" Miller asked. 6 hours at most, Walker replied. And this one's bigger than what damaged their ships in the first place. Mira stepped forward, her expression grave. The quantum core is still stabilizing. If this flare hits us now. She didn't need to finish. They had just saved thousands of lives. But now an even greater threat was approaching. The Vril ships were still too weak to move, and the human fleet had used most of its power in the rescue effort. Miller looked at his crew, then at the Vril officers. 6 hours, he said firmly. Then we'll have to face this one together. Start making plans. We're not losing anyone today. Around them, the massive ship hummed with renewed power, its systems slowly coming back to life. But out in the darkness of space, a wave of deadly radiation was racing toward them, threatening to undo everything they had accomplished. During the tense preparation for the approaching solar flare, something unexpected happened aboard the Vril civilian ship. As human and alien crews worked together to strengthen their defenses, they began to learn about each other in ways no one had planned. It started in the ship's main dining hall, where both species gathered during their short rest breaks. A young human engineer was sharing his water ration with a Vril child who seemed fascinated by the simple plastic bottle. Different, the child said in broken English, pointing at the bottle. We use crystal. The engineer smiled and pulled out his tablet. Show me, he asked, offering the device to the child. The Vril youngster, excited to share, drew a complex pattern that looked like a geometric flower. Water holder, the child explained. It cleans itself. Nearby, Captain Miller watched the exchange while discussing defense plans with High Commander Rel. The Vril leader had noticed too. Your people adapt quickly, Rel observed. Most species find our children unsettling. Miller shrugged. Kids are kids, no matter what they look like. Besides, we're learning as much as we're teaching. This was true across the ship. In engineering, Tom Walker and Mira had discovered they shared a love of solving complex puzzles. As they worked on strengthening the quantum core's defenses, they exchanged stories about their greatest technical challenges. You mean you built your first fusion reactor in a cave? Mira asked, her large eyes wide with surprise. Walker laughed. Well, it was a university lab, but it felt like a cave. We had no funding, so we used old car parts and recycled materials. Mira shook her head in amazement. Our technology comes from centuries of careful development. The idea of improvising, it's not in our nature. Sometimes the best solutions come from having to think differently, Walker replied, adjusting a power coupling. Like how we're using your quantum core's weakness as its strength now. In the medical bay, human doctors were learning about Vril biology while helping treat those affected by the life support failure. The Vril, in turn, were fascinated by human medical techniques. Your bodies heal themselves so quickly, a Vril doctor noted, watching the human medic treat a minor burn. We thought your species was fragile, but you're remarkably resilient. The cultural exchange spread throughout the ship. Vril engineers were amazed by human tools, simple but incredibly versatile. Humans were captivated by Vril art, which seemed to shift and change depending on the viewer's position. In one corner of the dining hall, a group of human technicians sat with Vril civilians, teaching each other their languages. The Vril language was complex and musical, while the humans were teaching simple English phrases. Sky, a Vril elder said carefully, pointing upward. Perfect. The human teacher smiled. Now try star. Even the children had started a game, mixing human and Vril rules into something new. They used floating light spheres from Vril technology and scoring rules from human soccer, creating a three-dimensional sport that had both species cheering. Miller found himself in a deep conversation with Rel about leadership and responsibility. The Vril commander had relaxed his formal stance, showing genuine interest in human perspectives. Your species is young, Rel said, but you understand something we have forgotten. The joy of discovery, of finding new ways to solve problems. And your people have knowledge we can barely imagine, Miller replied. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone. Their conversation was interrupted by Walker rushing in. Captain, Commander, he called. We found something interesting about the flare. Both leaders followed him to the science station, where Mira was studying complex readings. The quantum cores, she explained. They're all synchronized now, thanks to the human power transfer. If we coordinate them correctly, we might have a better chance against the flare than we thought. Walker finished. As they discussed the new possibility, Miller looked around the room. Human and Vril crew members worked side by side, no longer separated by their differences. In trying to save lives, they had built bridges between their species. The young Vril child floated past, chasing a light sphere while human children followed, laughing. Above them, a human engineer was teaching a Vril technician how to use a simple wrench, while nearby, a Vril artist was showing humans how to create living-like sculptures. They had less than 3 hours before the solar flare hit, but Miller felt more confident than ever. Together, they would find a way. The impossible had already happened. Two species from different worlds had become friends. Time was running out, but they weren't just two stranded fleets anymore. They were one crew, facing the challenge together. The solar flare approached like a wall of fire through space. On the main viewing screen of the Vril Command Center, it looked like a massive orange wave ready to crash over their ships. 1 hour until impact, Walker announced, his voice tense. He and Mira had been working non-stop on their plan to synchronize the quantum cores. Captain Miller stood at the command station with High Commander Rel, both leaders watching the incoming threat. The display showed their combined fleet, 15 massive Vril ships and 5 smaller human vessels, all arranged in a defensive formation. The civilian ships need to be in the center, Miller said, moving holographic markers on the tactical display. The military vessels will form the outer ring. Rel nodded in agreement. But your ships are too small to withstand the radiation. You should join the protected center. Miller shook his head. The Horizon and our other ships will take up positions between the gaps in your fleet's formation. We can use our fusion reactors to strengthen the magnetic shields. In engineering, Walker and Mira directed their mixed human-Vril teams in final preparations. The quantum cores of all 15 Vril ships now pulsed with the same blue energy, synchronized through the human power network. If this works, Mira said, checking the final calculations, the combined cores will create a magnetic shield large enough to protect the entire fleet. Walker adjusted power flows on his console. And if it doesn't work, then we will face our end together. Friend, Mira replied with a gentle touch on his shoulder. The evacuation of non-essential personnel to the most protected ships was almost complete. Human medical teams helped move Vril civilians, while Vril crew members guided humans to safe zones. The cooperation that had started as necessity had become natural. 30 minutes to impact, came the announcement over all ships. On the Horizon's bridge, Miller's first officer reported their position. We're in place, sir. All human ships report ready. The plan was risky. The human ships would use their remaining power to create magnetic channels between the Vril vessels, strengthening the quantum core network. But this meant the Earth ships would have minimal protection themselves. Begin power transfer sequence, Miller ordered. Divert everything except life support and basic shields. The effect was immediate. Blue energy streams connected the Vril ships through the positioned human vessels. On the tactical display, it looked like a giant web of light. 20 minutes to impact. In the civilian ships, Vril families gathered in the protected central chambers. Human crew members stayed with them, helping keep the children calm by continuing their shared games and stories from earlier. 15 minutes. Radiation levels rising. The first waves of energy from the flare began hitting their position. The human ships' hulls creaked under the strain, their shields already starting to weaken. Power network holding, Walker reported. Quantum cores at 95% synchronization. Miller watched as his ship's status indicators began turning from green to yellow. They were taking damage, but the plan was working. The Vril fleet's combined magnetic shield was growing stronger. 10 minutes to main impact. Suddenly, alarms blared across the horizon. "Sir," the engineering officer shouted. "Power coupling failing on Section 4. A gap was forming in the magnetic web. If it grew larger, the entire shield could collapse." Without hesitation, Miller made his decision. "Move the horizon into the gap," he ordered. "We'll use our hull to complete the circuit." "Captain," Rel's voice came over the comm. "That will expose your ship directly to the flare." "Better one ship than two fleets," Miller replied. "Do you have a better idea?" The horizon moved forward, positioning itself in the weakening section of the shield web. As soon as they were in position, Walker redirected all remaining power through the ship's systems. 5 minutes to impact. The horizon's hull temperature was rising rapidly. Warning lights flashed across every console as systems began to fail. "Shield network stabilizing," Mira reported. "The quantum cores are fully synchronized." 3 minutes. Miller looked at his crew, then at the approaching wall of fire on the main screen. They had done everything they could. Now they would see if human ingenuity and Vril technology together were enough to save them all. "All ships, brace for impact," he ordered, gripping his chair as the first massive wave of the solar flare reached them. "Here it comes." The combined fleet glowed blue against the orange fury of the solar storm. Human and Vril, now united, faced the approaching inferno together. The solar flare's intense light finally faded from the view screens. For several long moments, both human and Vril crews held their breath, waiting to see what remained of their combined fleet. Inside the horizon, emergency lights flickered dimly. The ship's hull was scorched black in many places, and most systems were offline. Captain Miller pulled himself up from the floor where the last impact had thrown him. "Status report," he called out, his voice hoarse from the smoke of burned-out circuits. "Hull integrity at 43%. Someone answered through the haze. "Life support functional. Everything else is." They paused. "Sir, we're alive." Across the fleet, similar reports began coming in. One by one, ships reported their condition. The synchronized quantum cores had held. The magnetic shield had worked. All Vril civilian ships intact. High Commander Rel's voice crackled through the damaged comm system. "Your plan succeeded, Captain Miller. Though I fear your ship paid a heavy price." Miller looked around his bridge. The horizon was damaged, but his crew was grinning through the smoke and debris. They had done the impossible. In the engineering section, Tom Walker and Mira worked together to assess the quantum core network. What they found amazed them. "The cores didn't just survive," Mira said, studying the readings. "They're stronger now. The flare's energy. They absorbed it." Walker nodded excitedly. "The magnetic web we created didn't just defend against the radiation. It channeled it, just like we did with the original solar interference. The quantum cores are now operating at 130% of their normal capacity." The news spread quickly through both fleets. Not only had they survived, but the Vril ships were now more powerful than before their original breakdown. Over the next few days, human and Vril crews worked together to repair the damaged vessels. The horizon received special attention from Vril engineers, who used their advanced technology to help restore the ship that had sacrificed itself to save them all. A week after the solar flare, leaders from both species gathered in the Great Hall of the largest Vril ship. High Commander Rel stood before the assembled crews. "Throughout our 1,000 years of space travel," Rel began, "the Vril have encountered many species, but none have shown the courage, innovation, and friendship that humanity has demonstrated." The commander raised a crystal sphere that glowed with swirling colors. "This is the Stellar Unity Crystal, our highest symbol of alliance. Today we present it to Earth, marking the beginning of a new partnership between our peoples." Miller accepted the crystal on behalf of humanity. As he held it, the colors shifted to show both Earth and the Vril homeworld orbiting the same star. "We came here to rescue you," Miller said, addressing the gathered crowd. Instead, we found something far more valuable. Proof that different species, no matter how far apart they begin, can work together to overcome any challenge. The ceremony was followed by a celebration that mixed human and Vril traditions. Children played their new hybrid games while adults shared stories and plans for the future. The great hall echoed with both human laughter and the musical tones of Vril joy. In a quiet corner, Walker and Mira finalized plans for a joint engineering project. Your fusion technology combined with our quantum cores, Mira said, showing him the designs. Together, we could build ships that can travel further than either of our species ever dreamed. And better emergency response systems, Walker added with a grin, just in case we find more stranded fleets out there. As the celebration continued, Miller stood with Rel on an observation deck, watching Earth shine in the distance. What happens now? Miller asked. Rel gestured to the stars around them. Now, old friend, we explore together. The Vril have maps of 1,000 worlds, but your people see things we miss. Together, there is no limit to what we might discover. The horizon, newly repaired with Vril technology, gleamed alongside the alien fleet. Its hull now bore both human and Vril markings, a symbol of their united future. What had started as a rescue mission had become humanity's first step into a larger universe. They had gained not just allies, but friends among the stars. As both fleets prepared for the journey home, one thing was clear. The greatest discoveries come not from advanced technology, but from different peoples working together, each bringing their own strengths to face the challenges ahead. Earth would never be the same, and that was exactly what both species were counting on.